Okay, so Bob gave me quite an introduction. Thank you, Bob. So I am a pastor of Tucson Community Fellowship, Church of the Nazarene. We actually are, this coming Sunday will be 1 month in. So brand new church plant, really excited. God's doing exciting things. As far as my experience, I am also a special ed teacher. I have been a special ed teacher for 17 years. Currently, the first time I'm a senior pastor, but I've been in ministry for more than 20 years. Some of my time in ministry was here, doing the children's ministry right here at Passion. So this is something that I am extremely passionate about. I've had the opportunity to go to several churches and teach on how we can include all of our little ones in church and in the kingdom and their families. And so I'm really excited to share with you guys today. We're going to start with a little bit of an activity. Charles? Oh no, it didn't correct. Go back. That's weird. I changed it in Google and it didn't change there. So anyways, I'm gonna leave it on this while we do the activity. So I need 10 volunteers. Come on, you can do it. Just come up to the table and stand in front of a brown paper bag. Come on up to the table and stand in front. Do not open it. Do not look in it. Do not shake it. We got more room over here. We've got three more spots over here. Come on. And I have my very own brown paper bag. Come on. All right. So when I say go, no looking at other people's at your table. You are going to follow the directions that are in your bag, and you are going to duplicate what is in my bag. Okay? Ready? Begin. Go, sorry, go. You're right. I said when I say go, and then I said begin. My bad. I'm going to come down here because I kind of want to see what's going on a little bit. I'm just going to come to the edge.
I have no idea what I'm supposed to do.
My money's on Roderick in this table.
Yeah. My money's also on Roderick. All right, we got 1 minute left. So Roderick's done. No pressure, for sure pressure. And stop. Hands off the Legos, please. Okay, so how many of you have this tower?
Nope.
Roderick has it. Good job, Roderick. You were such a good listener. I love it. Thank you for listening and following directions so well. I love it. Nobody else?
I mean, like,
Okay. It's close. Good effort, Justin. Good effort. You were close. Okay, so those of you that were up here, how many of you were experiencing frustration? Okay. Can someone share why were you experiencing frustration?
I have no idea what
Barbara, what was your frustration?
I really didn't know what you wanted.
You didn't know what I wanted, but you had directions.
Yeah, but they didn't make sense to me.
They didn't make sense to you. Okay. Anyone else?
I am very frustrated because I like to be following steps
Okay.
and I'm very structured. And this was not structured. It was not anything I can really follow.
It was very structured. Legos are structured. This was a very structured activity where I was very clear on and very intentional about my instructions. It was maybe not structured in a way you can understand it, but it was very structured, I guarantee. Okay? But it was frustrating because you didn't understand the structure, right? You didn't understand the goal. You didn't understand the steps. So yes, if you start comparing some notes, yes, your note cards are all different. Roderick here had very clearly laid out note card. Way to pick the right bag.
I want to know what happened to Vicky.
Vicky, did you just have the one that said build your tower? No, it's okay. So Vicky's had all of hers, but not necessarily structured in the right order and no numbers. Whereas Roderick had you have this number here and this number here and this number here of this color. Different people had different pieces of the instructions. So the purpose of this activity is because you're saying, well, I didn't understand the instructions. It wasn't clear. It wasn't structured, but it was. I put a lot of effort into the structure of this lesson. You should have understood it. That's the problem that happens a lot of times with our children. They have missing pieces in the instructions. They don't understand certain pieces of it. They can't process certain pieces of it. And you're saying, well, I've told you what to do. Why aren't you doing it? They don't have all the pieces. It is frustrating for them. So this is just a little activity to kind of, you are more than welcome to keep the Legos if you would like them. My gift to you, you may keep the instructions, sure. Go ahead and have a seat. Yes, go ahead and have a seat. So, again, it's just to get us in the mindset to understand even tasks that are seemingly simple to us, you take the paper bags. You take them. They were actually gifted to me because I was sorting all of these yesterday and realized that I didn't have any. So one of my coworkers was like, here. So even when we give directions that we think are clear and direct, it's not always understood that way by all of the children we work with. There are many different things that can get in the way of understanding and processing some of those directions. And when that happens, it leads to a lot of frustration. I'm gonna ask again for the people that were up here, how many of you got irritated when I praised Roderick for following the directions so well. Yeah, because you're like, I was following the directions, right? It can be frustrating, especially when we spend a lot of time, we praise and we encourage those kids that are doing it the way that we imagined them to do it. And this other kid is trying their best. And they're just missing the mark. And they just feel defeated. Right? Can you click through, skip the activity slide and just go to the next one? Story time. So I'm going to share with you guys some stories. I told you that I have been in the field of special education for 17 years. I've also been in ministry all of that time as well. And when the parents that I work with at my schools hear that I am also in ministry, they oftentimes open up and share their experiences. I'm sad to report that those experiences are not usually positive. Those experiences include the church that I grew up in, that I met my husband in, no longer welcomes us because they don't know what to do with our child. And they say we can come, but our child can't. Who's going to a church that their child can't go to? Right? Or the church that we are attending, that we've attended and served in many years, has told us that our kid can come, but I have to be with them the whole time. So I have to give up the ministry that I've been doing to work with my kid. Or I don't get to worship because I have to sit with my kid because they don't know how or want to support them. Or your kid can come to church, but even though he's 9, he has to stay in the nursery because due to his disability, he's not potty trained. And we're not willing to come up with a plan. So he doesn't get to participate with other kids his age. He doesn't get to hear the lessons. He can sit in the nursery and be on the same level as 1 and 2-year-olds. I would love to say these stories are unique, but they're not. They're not unique at all. And it's really a heartbreaking reality that we as the church have to own up to and have to fix. Can you click for me? Now, here's the thing. I know that many of those churches, they're not doing it out of ill will, right? They're not doing it because they just really dislike that family or dislike children. That's not the heart behind that. But it's fear. How do what if something happens and I don't know how to respond? What if I don't handle things correctly? What if they act out and something else happens? Right? There's so much fear based around it because they don't have the knowledge. And that's one of the things I was so grateful when Carolyn reached out to me, because she came to me and she said, hey, we have some knowledge gaps in this area. And instead of responding with fear, she said, let's get answers. That's the way we have to respond as the church. We can't respond with fear. We have to respond looking for the answers, looking for how do we move forward, right? God did not give us a spirit of fear. Don't operate and live in that. Because the hard truth is to deny a family access to church, access to the gospel, to deny a child access to the gospel because you don't have the know-how is sinful. There's no bones about it. To deny someone access to the kingdom because you don't have a skill set is sinful. Here we go. We got John 3:16. For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only son, that whoever believes in him shall have eternal life. Romans 15:7, therefore welcome one another as Christ has welcomed you for the glory of God. Luke 14:13-14, but when you give a feast, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, the blind, and you will be blessed, because they cannot repay you, for you will be repaid at the resurrection of the just. James 2:1, my brothers, show no partiality as you hold the faith in our Lord Jesus Christ, the Lord of glory. Philippians 2:3-4, do nothing from selfish ambition or conceit, but in humility count others more significant than yourselves, Let each of you look not only to his own interests, but also to the interests of others. Colossians 3:11, here there is not Greek or Jew, circumcised or uncircumcised, barbarian, Scythian, slave, free, but Christ is all and in all. Colossians 1:16-17, for by him all things were created, in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rulers or authorities, all things were created through him and for him. And he is before all things, and in him all things hold together. Mark 10:14-15. But when Jesus saw it, he was indignant and said to them, let the children come to me. Do not hinder them, for to such belongs the kingdom of God. Truly I say to you, whoever does not receive the kingdom of God like a child shall not enter it. Do we believe that? Do we believe that the gospel is for all? That Christ created all and works in all? Because if we believe that, our practices have to reflect that. All includes children with disabilities, adults with disabilities. It includes families dealing with disabilities, right? They're included in all. So our actions have to reflect that. So what are we to do about it? Well, first off, we have to actually welcome everybody, which, unless Passion has changed drastically since I've been here, you guys do a pretty good job out, right? Being a welcoming community that accepts and welcomes anyone who comes through the doors, regardless of ability level, regardless of background, regardless of mental health status, right? We have to welcome all. We have to remove barriers. And we're gonna talk a little bit about that in more detail, but we have to look at what practices, what things we're doing, whether intentional or not, that are creating barriers for people, and we need to remove those. And then we need to educate ourselves. We need to understand how to respond, what different issues look like, and how we can support families and children, which is what we're doing right now. We already answered why education. It addresses that lack of know-how, right? It eliminates fear because it no longer becomes, well, I don't know what to do with them. When we educate ourselves, we have the know-how. It gives us the tools to be able to respond. And so today we're gonna look at three areas. I'm not going to necessarily address specific disabilities. There will be things that we hear about. We were having a conversation out in the lobby because we're talking about working with children that are neurodivergent. And so I just wanna clarify when we talk about neurodivergent. Because it was pointed out, well, everyone's different, right? And yes, right, we are all different people, we are all unique. That being said, there is a range of typical functioning that a person has cognitively, sensory, emotionally, that is typical. And yes, there are ranges within that, but there is typical range that your average person falls into. And I know people are like, well, we're not typical, but there is still a range that 95% of people fall into. Okay? When we're talking about people that are neurodivergent, we're talking about people that fall outside of that range. Okay? They have some processing delay or emotional communication, some sort of delay that is happening in their person that makes it difficult for them to access things in the same way that we do. This would be categorized as a disability. Now, I know some people don't like that word. That is the way it's categorized, though. Neurodivergency is synonymous when we're talking about it in this way with someone who has a disability of some kind. So we're going to be addressing disabilities that impact 3 areas, because these are the 3 areas that tend to be the hardest for people to deal with, that tend to be the reasons where churches are saying, I'm sorry, we can't, right? And we don't want to be that church. So we're going to look at people that have communication delays. And we're going to look at how we can address working with individuals with communication delays, behavioral issues, behavioral delays, and then also physical. I'm going to be honest, the physical tends to be the one that's easiest for most people. The first 2 are a lot more challenging. And so we're going to look at each of these. Fact, communication is key. Yeah, you guys will get to see a lot of my personality in these slides because I like to have fun. Communication is key. And it's important when we talk about communication that we understand that communication is a lot more than the words that we use. Right? And so communication is key when we are talking about how we speak to children. It is key when we're talking about how we speak to the parents of those children. It is key in so many ways because how we communicate, not just what we communicate, but how we communicate it, has significant impacts. In fact, how we communicate often has a stronger impact than what we communicate. So the first question we need to address is, how do we communicate about our children? Okay? How do we talk to the parents? Because when we have, I would say this is the starting point. When you have a child that comes into your church that is neurodivergent, the first place we should start is to talk to those parents. Talk to them about their child. Because yes, maybe that child can't communicate in the way that we traditionally do. Maybe they don't communicate with words, but I guarantee they communicate. Right? They communicate through their gestures. They communicate through their body language. They communicate through their cries. And their parents are going to be a wealth of information about how that child communicates. So start with talking to the parent about their child. Not just what are the child's deficits, what are their strengths? Tell me what your child is good at. Tell me what your child is successful with that we can encourage them in. Right? Maybe their child can't communicate, but they're really good at sharing their toys. Awesome. Right? Talk to them about what their children are good at, about how their child communicates things, communicates stress, so that you can be aware of those things and you can respond. I recommend when you guys get new children to have an information sheet. I know you probably already have some sort of way to collect information. Does it include a question about whether their child is neurodivergent? Does it include information about how you can support them? It should, right? Give the parent a place to inform you. We're going to be a lot more successful if we know what we're getting into. Okay? And the other thing is regular team meetings. So you guys have a good sized team here, and that's great. And it is great that we have so many people that are volunteering to work with kids. But if Vicky is working with a kid and she works really well with the kid, and that kid is always successful when they're with Vicky, but then they're doing a terrible job, I'm gonna pick on you for a minute, when they're with Justin, okay? It's probably not because Justin's a bad guy, right? It's probably not because he's doing something wrong. But it might be that Vicky responds in a certain way to that child, that she understands certain triggers, that she uses certain phrasing that child responds really well to. So especially when we're working with children that are neurodivergent, we need to share what's working. We need to communicate with each other. Because to set that kid up where, well, when this person's volunteering, they do great, and when this person's volunteering, we have meltdowns. That's not fair to that worker, first of all. You're gonna lose volunteers that way. But it's also not fair to that child or to that parent, right? We need to be communicating with each other what's working, what's not working, making sure that we are communicating regularly, and making sure that we're communicating positively. Because that's the other thing, when we're talking about how do we talk to parents, how do we talk to each other, it needs to be positively. I know that there are gonna be struggle things that happen, but we need to be making sure, especially with parents, that we're telling them the good things their kid has done. Trust me, a lot of parents who have kids with disabilities, they are inundated with what their child can't do. It's overwhelming. They don't need to hear that again. Tell them what their child is doing well. Tell them how their child engaged in worship. Tell them how their child, engaged in the lesson. Those are good things to communicate. When we're talking about the child as well, because there are times when we are gonna have to communicate things that didn't go well, try to not do that in front of the kid. Okay? Because you might be like, oh, they're playing, they're not listening. Yeah, they are. They're hearing what you're saying. So when there are things that you have to address that are more disruptive or difficult or challenging things, make sure that we're not discussing that in front of the child. Okay? So this is talking about the child, right? It's important how we talk about the child, but more important, those are just some examples of info sheets that ask about neurodivergency, ask about disabilities. It's how do we talk to the child? How do we talk to them? We should always start with the assumption that they can understand. Even if they're nonverbal, they can probably understand what you're saying. You should always start with the assumption that they can understand. Because you can always add more clarity when they don't understand, but what you can't do is back up the fact that you talked down to someone or made them feel little, right? And then I love my little picture here. 90% of communication is nonverbal, right? It's not the words that we're saying. So again, when we have kids that are nonverbal, they communicate. They communicate a lot, actually. So being aware also of your nonverbals when you're communicating with a kid. So I'm gonna do an example, right? So if my statement is that I need them to sit down, right? I can say, hey guys, sit down for me, please. Or I can say, sit down. Or I can go, sit down. We're communicating very different things, right? Be careful of what you're communicating with your nonverbals. Make sure that you are communicating that you believe they are capable, that you believe in their strengths, because they pick up on those things. Use visuals. Whenever we can, whenever we're giving a direction, whenever we're doing really anything, you're doing a Bible story, have some pictures to go with it. Do a play, do whatever it is. I don't know what curriculum you guys have, but like use visuals. Because kids that have a hard time with verbal language, they can understand pictures great, right? They can understand emotions and fluctuations in voice really well. So use those other ways of communicating that. Use visuals, use drama, use song, all to communicate the same messages. Follow routines. When a kid struggles with language processing, if the directions change every time, it becomes really hard to process that every time. I actually really appreciated that Roderick pointed out that I said, when I say go, and then I said begin, and he said, you didn't say go. And he was right. He was right. We need to be clear in our directions. We need to be routine in our directions. This means having like a signal word. If we can all get on the same page that we're going to signal for attention in the same way, if we can all get on the same page that our routines that we're going to have are going to be the same each time, that is going to help not just our kids that are neurodivergent, but all kids. It is going to help all of them follow the routine. It is going to help our kids that are typical support the other kids in that they understand the routine, so they're now able, instead of you having to correct them, they can be like, hi, come, we're sitting here now, right? It can help them when there are new kids that come in. Because how powerful is it that if a new kid comes, that it's not just the adult volunteer that's always giving the directions and explaining everything, but if other kids can, because it's so routine and they're so comfortable in their space that they can lead others in that. How empowering is that for them, right? Routines are really valuable when it comes to communication. And a lot of that is because it allows you to cut down on the amount of stuff you actually have to verbally communicate. And then finally, use sign language. This is something that is good to do with all kids. It can help all kids because it gives them a visual cue. When you don't have a picture to go with something, you have a sign that goes with it. That really helps them. It gives them a visual cue as well as a verbal cue. Maybe they didn't hear you, but they see the hand motion. Okay, so we're gonna go through and do some signs, because maybe you don't know them. And these are printed out for you, okay? And yes, I'm gonna ask that you actually do them, okay? We've got please. Because we want our kids to be respectful and kind, we should definitely model that, right? We should ask please. We should say thank you. Open, this is a good one, like if you're talking about Bibles and stuff, we want to open. Open. It flips. Okay? Open. Eat or food. This is an important sign. We'll get to a lot of behavior results from kids being hungry. Kids don't know how to handle hangry. Food is important. Okay? Bathroom, this is the sign for T. So it's a little shaking toilet. Okay? Gots to go, toilet or bathroom. Wait. This is a great thing when a kid is excited and wants to do the next thing, just be like, hey, wait, just wait. A lot of times the kids will mirror that and it actually helps them. Okay? Jesus. You're touching the nails in the hands. Jesus. Sorry, I can't remember the order that we do them all in, so I keep looking back. Stop. Stop. Help. It goes up towards you. Help. Help me. Help you. Help them. It's directional. What are we helping with? Okay, it points towards what we're helping with. Help. Finished. Starts palms facing you, outward. Finished. Okay? This is really helpful when a kid's really into an activity and it's time to move on. It's finished, we're all done, right? We need to move on. Want. Okay, this is really helpful for kids. What do they want? What are they asking for? More, and play. These are just some basics. Guys, you can Google any of this too, right? If there's a phrase that you're like, oh, I really need, this is a phrase we use a lot, right? There are a lot of Christian phrases that we could look up, right? We could talk about Lord and King. Those are all very similar, actually. Having signs that you can associate. Now, I get, I'm not saying we all have to be fluent in sign language, right? I'm not saying you have to learn another language. But if you can learn some key phrases that will help, at least in giving directions and in that communication, it's really helpful. The next slide is the alphabet. We're not going to go through all that right now. Do you guys want me to go through that right now, or are you okay with the visuals? Okay, I'm getting some head nods. Okay. So we got A, B, C. It's directional. All of sign language is very directional. If you do it backwards, it means something different. Okay? Be careful. D, E, curled in tight. F, G. It's 2 fingers turned sideways. Like this, but sideways. So thumb down. Yeah, the pictures are not always the greatest, right? It doesn't show you that there's a gap. It looks like it's flat, but there's a gap. G, H, I, J. It's with your pinky finger, because you just did the I, and you just loop it. K, thumb in between the 2 fingers, yep. K, L, M, it's 3 fingers. You're showing the bumps of the M, okay? M, then N is just with 2. O, P is just like K, except it's upside down. The person who came up with this had a sense of humor. If you're not seeing it, we can talk later. Okay, P. Q is just like G, but it's upside down. Okay, Q. R. It's like the I promise, cross my fingers, right? R. S. Thumb is in front of the fist. Remember, A is where it's to the side. S is in the front. T. Remember, think of toilet. T is 1 finger. It is in between the 1 finger. T. I just lost my alphabet. U. Straight up and together, because V is separated. W. X. You make a pirate hook, because X marks the spot. Okay. I'm telling you, the person who invented this had a sense of humor. X. Y. Z. Okay? You can spell out anything. Even if you don't know other signs, learn the letters really well. Okay? Because you can spell out anything. And that's really helpful, because a lot of times people that don't have verbal communication do have the cognitive ability to communicate in other ways. And so this can be one way that you empower them to be able to communicate. Okay. Look at how cute that kid is. The next thing we're going to talk about is behavior. And this tends to be one of the hardest things, is how do we deal with kids that are behaving differently, that aren't following our behavioral expectations, that are doing things that are a little bit different. I forgot to say at the beginning, but like, you guys are all sitting in your seats very lovely. You don't have to. Just if you would rather sit on the floor or lay down or stand or walk around while I do this, feel free. I know I don't like to sit for that long. You might also notice like I don't have shoes on because I don't like to wear shoes. I don't like the way they feel, right? And part of that is just also modeling, like, is it okay if someone takes their shoes off? Yeah. Is it okay if they can't sit still? Yeah. So a lot of when it comes to behavior is picking our battles and understanding what are and are not things that we really need to enforce. My general rule that I tell everyone is a good rule. If what they are doing is not disrupting other people around them or harming them, it's fine. If what someone is doing is not disrupting other people, right? So if I'm sitting here and poking and talking to the person next to me and pulling on them, that's disrupting them, right? But if I'm walking around or playing with a fidget or rocking in my seat or touching things on the wall, that's not disrupting other people. It's fine. If what I'm doing is not harmful, right? If I'm squeezing and pulling at my hands and stuff like that, it's not harmful, that's fine. If I'm doing something that's like going to cut me or injure me, not fine. So please just, if it's not disruptive or dangerous, it's acceptable. We're going to talk a little bit more about some different behavioral things as well. Okay, before we can really dive into behavior, we have to address precipitating factors. It's a lovely big education word, but basically it means that there's a reason why people are feeling the way they feel. And a lot of times it has nothing to do with the current situation, right? We all come with our own set of issues, with our own things that happened in the morning before church. One of the examples that I have often used is like, as an adult, I had to fight my kid for 45 minutes to get them to put shoes on so we could get out the door. I'm a little irritated this morning. And then I had a lovely person point out, as a child, my mom yelled at me for 45 minutes to put my shoes on. Right? But we all have things that affect our emotional and mental well-being. What are some of those things that like weigh heavy on you? Oh, come on, help me out, guys. Food, I'm hungry. Do my clothes fit right? As an adult, like, do I look okay? I'm just, as adults, I'm not asking you to get in the mind of kids right now. As adults, right? I'm hungry. My clothes are fitting weird. I think I gained weight. I'm really tired. We were out of coffee creamer this morning in my house because my kids didn't tell me we ran out and I didn't buy more. And I'm not caffeinated. Trust me, not properly caffeinated KT is not pleasant. Maybe we're not feeling well. Maybe we're struggling to pay bills right now. Maybe we're having some family issues, right? There are all sorts of things that impact us, that impact our emotional and mental well-being. And guess what? All of those same things impact kids. Because I know they don't pay the bills, but they see you stressing over them, right? They see when other people aren't feeling good. They feel those same feelings. A lot of times the difference is that kids have not yet learned how to handle those things. They don't know what to do with those emotions, with those things of life. And a lot of times, because they're so young, they can't do anything about those issues. So when we're going into leading church, we need to remember that these are not like half people. These are full people that are dealing with the full spectrum of things that people deal with. And they don't have the words or the tools to know how to deal with them. Now, the reason I say this is because it's important to remember that when behaviors and things are happening, don't take it personally. It's not about you. It's not about you. They're dealing with a lot of things. Don't take it personally. When kids start having behaviors, see that as this is a person who is struggling with something and doesn't know how to deal with it. How can I help them? How can I help them deal with that? And I know right now we're just talking about perspective shifts, but can I tell you that those perspective shifts are going to make a huge difference? How we approach it and how we think about a situation determines how we respond. So we have to look at precipitating factors first. Then we can do universal accommodations. My little minion, he loves routines and procedures. We already talked about this a little bit, but routines and procedures for everything. For if they have to go to the bathroom, for when we move from worship time to sitting down time, for when we move from game time, for everything. Have a routine and a procedure that is consistent. Doesn't matter who's volunteering that week, we have the same routines and procedures. Okay? We do things the same way. Now, you're all gonna have different styles, you all have different personalities, that's fine. But when we move from one thing to the next and how that is done should be consistent. Should be consistent for the kids. For all children, yeah. Not just for kids that are neurodivergent, for all children. And honestly, for all volunteers. Because I don't want to have to try and think about like, how am I going to get them to make this transition? How am I going to do it should be automatic, right? And at first, you might have to spend extra time teaching that. But it's going to become so automatic that when new kids come in, you're not going to have to explain to them how we transition. You're not going to, because the other kids are going to know it and they're going to make the transition for you. Okay, this will make everything run smoother. Routines and procedures are a game changer and they really need to be consistent. So I'm going to look at the people that I know are leading it, come up with a consistent plan, apply it universally. So the next thing is have realistic behavior expectations and pick your battles. I'm going to share with you a story. So when my husband and I first met, when we first got married, Bob shared with you guys, we were over at Central Nazarene, which is just up the road. My husband was the youth pastor at the time. And there was one guy in our youth, and he was one of the coolest guys I've ever met. I still love him, love when I get to see him, get to hang out with him to this day. Profoundly impacted by ADHD. Profoundly. And when my husband would teach, I have permission to use his name, Nick had an exercise ball. And Nick would bounce on the exercise ball and he would roll on the exercise ball and he'd be upside down on the exercise ball and he would be all over the place. Now, before I met my husband, he told me that the first Sunday that this happened, that this kid came, it was a little problematic because he was doing it right in front of everyone. And so it was very distracting. So the next week, my husband said, hey man, can you just take this and can you just go to the back with it? And then he bounced and he rolled and he literally hung upside down for half the lesson. I'm not kidding, rolled over with his head on the ground and his body over the ball with his face towards my husband. Would do most of the lesson that way. But he was in the back and other people could face forward and they didn't have to see that and they didn't have to be distracted by that, right? And then at the end when there would be discussion, when there would be questions, can I tell you he would be one of the first that would volunteer information that would have some of the deepest, most profound biblical insights I've ever heard from a youth. Profound. knowledge and understanding. When he was about 19, he wanted to become an official member of the church. And at that church, to become a member, they had a membership class. And the membership class was led by the senior pastor. And he really, really, really wanted to show respect to the senior pastor. And so he went into that lesson, and his goal was to sit and be respectful. And he did it. He sat quiet and calm and respectfully in his seat. He didn't wiggle. He didn't, fidget with things. He was so respectful. He was so put together. And he came out of that lesson and he immediately walked up to my husband and he was like sweating, not even kidding, sweating. Because it took so much mental and physical effort for him to sit there and not move. He went up to my husband and he said, Pastor Chuck, I'm gonna need you to go through all of that information with me again because I have no idea what he said. All of his mental and emotional energy went into, I'm going to behave the right way. That's not what we want, right? That's not what we want. So we can set parameters. If you need to jump and move around and wiggle, here's the section you can do that in where it's not gonna disrupt other people, right? If you really need to lay on the floor, there is the floor. Right? Keep those, like I said before, if it's not disruptive to other people or dangerous, it's acceptable. Have behavior signals. So again, this kind of goes to routines and procedures. So if there are certain things that you want done, how you get people's attention. For example, even as a pastor to adults, I have done this, right? Where I signal to my church when it is time to preach. Currently, we sing the doxology. That's our signal, okay? So people know that the service is starting and fellowship time is done when the doxology starts. That's our signal. I've been in churches in the past where it's God is good. Oh, come on, guys, God is good. There we go, and all the time, right? Whatever those things are, have certain signals. Again, that everyone uses. This is my signal to get attention. This is my signal to show that we're transitioning. When we're done with the lesson portion, here's what it's gonna look like. That's just part of routines and procedures. Have some sort of reward system. Whatever that may be. I've been at churches where they've given out a ticket to a kid each time they come and they get to be entered in a raffle. Have some sort of thing that is a reward system. A lot of times kids with, specifically with ADHD, part of what's impacted is their ability, is your frontal lobe, which impacts motivation. So a lot of those kids don't have internal motivation. And I know that sounds odd, but they don't have that internal motivation to I'm just gonna do it because it's the right thing to do, because it's good for me. They need an extrinsic reward. Okay, some of them really do need the coupon or the sticker or the high five even. Okay, have some sort of reward system and then allow for movement. Actually with children, the longest stretch of time that you actually have their mental focus, anyone got a guess how long that is? 8 minutes. Huh? 8 minutes. Average is about 15. Is the absolute max that you can get to.
What is it for adults?
Studies show between 20 and 25.
That's about right.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why I keep my sermons to under 25 minutes. I'm we're done. Yeah, so I know right now we're going longer than that, right? But hopefully we're having some interaction and it's not too bad. But yeah, so sitting in a spot and just listening to someone deliver information, you've got 15 minutes tops. So when we're doing our Bible lessons, if they're longer than that, we need to have breaks where we have movement, where we're doing different things, right? We cannot just expect them to sit and listen to a message delivered for 30 to 40 minutes. Because, well, Pastor Bob preaches for 30 to 40 minutes. Yeah. I was being generous. I remember. Being mindful of that amount of time. Again, be realistic with your expectations. Some kids are going to need a little bit extra than that. Oh, my little gift didn't work. Okay. That's a little guy blowing a whistle shouting buddy, and if you've ever seen Heavyweights. Yeah, buddy! Yes, thank you. Some kids need additional check-ins, right? They need you to go in and check in with their behavior regularly. They need additional feedback more regularly than other kids will. Some kids are going to need a higher rate of a reward system. So maybe you give everyone a ticket every time they come if they are good the whole time. Well, little Luther might need a ticket every 5 to 10 minutes. Okay, I use that name, that's my son. He needs a ticket every 5 to 10 minutes. Okay, again, especially with kids that don't have that intrinsic motivator embedded in them, as most of us do, they're going to need more regular feedback, especially when they're younger. And then we can fade that out, but when they're younger, they're gonna need more feedback.
I think I know what you mean by check-ins, but can you give an example during the class?
Yes, I mean during the class. So hopefully we have more than one volunteer in the room, yeah? Okay, so whoever's delivering the lesson up front, right? Someone else might need to come by more regularly and just give them a little tap or say, hey, you're doing a really good job, and move on, right? Or like, if they see them getting wiggly, hey, do you wanna come stand over here by me? Or, hey, do you wanna play with my little sparkle cube? It's wonderful. It broke open and glitter started coming out. I left Bob a present on the stage.
Just said positive, it wasn't negative. You didn't say the word don't, you didn't say the words.
Correct. Yeah, it's encouraging them. Now, if they are doing something that is disruptive or dangerous, right? Sometimes we will have to address that. If you can, address it with just a substitute, right? If a kid is pulling on someone else's clothes, instead of going over and saying, stop pulling on them, I might just go over and say, hey, why don't you come sit with me? Come sit with me, right? Instead of telling them, hey, stop picking at the back of the chair, I'm gonna give them like a fidget or a pop-it. Be like, here, why don't you use this instead? I'm also not gonna call it out in front of everyone, right? I'm up here teaching and be like, Heidi, stop, right? Sorry. You were a name I remembered, sorry. Because nobody likes that. Could you imagine if Bob was up here preaching and he just called you out in front of the congregation and was like, hey, stop having a conversation over there. How many of us would hate that, right? Our kids do too, just so you know. Nobody likes to be called out in front of a group. Nobody. So when I say check-ins, I'm talking about individually, one-on-one, redirect, or praise, right? Not scold, redirect, or praise. Because again, a lot of these behaviors, when they're fidgeting or picking at something or stuff like that, those are compulsive things. They're not picking at the back of the chair because they want to destroy the chair because they really hate that we have nice chairs, right? They're just feeling fidgety and they're having an outlet. Give them a different outlet. Again, don't assume that the behavior is malicious. they're children. 99% of the time, it's not malicious. I'm not gonna say it never is. There will be moments, but 99% of the time. Use a buddy. So this is great. If you do have a kid that has much higher needs, maybe when that kid's there, you need to have a third volunteer because you need to have a volunteer that's just with that kid. Sometimes that's needed. Sometimes this is actually a great place if you've got high schoolers and youth. This is a great place to plug them in. Hey, one Sunday a month, can you come be a buddy for this little guy? Right? And let them, because not only does it empower the youth to feel like they are contributing, but also the kid is seeing, oh, this is another kid, this is one of the cool big kids. And they're gonna listen to them better than they're gonna listen to you because you're an adult and you're boring. Part of the boring adult club, it's okay. Right? But no, seriously, like having an older kid, if you're able to do that, is super motivating for the little guys, right? They love the big kids. So if we can use the big kids, great. But having a buddy system, even if it's just like a 6th grader with a 1st grader, right? Those buddies really help where there's a kid that can help them stay on track. Okay. When there are behaviors that do need to be addressed, right? Because sometimes there will be behaviors where we do have to address it. And I can't just say like, hey, why don't you do this instead? Because what they're doing is dangerous, right? Or disruptive and my redirect didn't work. You want to set a limit. This is a way to redirect the behavior while still staying positive, but being very clear. So limit setting is making sure you are very clear on what the expectation is and what the outcome will be for that. Okay? They are respectful. They are reasonable. And they are simple. When kids are misbehaving in some way, when they are acting out, is because they are dysregulated. Okay? They are already, if they're not accepting that redirection of just like, here's something else, they're already starting to get into an irrational state of being. Trying to rationalize with an irrational person is not effective. Never will be, okay? So we keep our words short and simple and clear. The less amount of words you can use to get your point across, the better. You also want them to be reasonable, which means they must be enforceable. We're in a church, so I'm going to use a church example that has happened in the past, okay? And I know that this would never happen here, so please understand that because, like, we dance on stage here. So, but literally, I have known people that are adults now that when they were little would dance during worship and were told, if you dance, you're gonna go to hell. What? That is not a reasonable thing to say to somebody, right? And I use that because it's an extreme example, right? But be reasonable in what you're saying. Don't tell them that you're going to enforce something that we all know you're not gonna enforce, okay? Definitely don't tell them if they don't behave, they can't come back to church. That's not reasonable. That's not biblical. Examples of this, ones that I have often used is when you do a first then. So they want to do something, they really want to play. First, we're going to do the Bible story, then play. First, clean up, then we go on the playground. Right? Simple phrasing, first then. Some kids need to know the negative side of things too. My son is one of those. He has to hear the flip side. He has to be able to weigh his options. So for him, I use a if then. If you clean up, then you can go to the playground. If you don't, you can't. It's not if you don't, then here's my laundry list of consequences. The natural consequence. What do they want? If we listen to the lesson now, then we can play with the crayons. If we don't listen to the lesson, we can't get the crayons out. Whatever it might be, but some kids need the flip side. They need to know both sides.
So if then, sometimes like playground, some of the kids want to go climb all the way to the top of it. And like if they fall, I mean they're 20 feet in the air. Like it could be really bad.
So
If you do that, you could fall and get hurt. Some of them are like, so?
I mean,
What do we, I mean, that's
there are natural consequences to things.
that's one that happens here quite a bit.
So, I mean, with that one, I would say if you follow the rules, then you can play on the playground. If you don't follow the rules, you can't play on the playground. And I would stop that person from getting on the playground.
So the rule is nobody climbs to the top.
I mean, if that's your rule. I mean, if that's a safety concern, that's a genuine rule, then yeah.
Okay, talking about dysregulated places,
Uh-huh.
when a child's dysregulated, are they even able to comprehend and get that?
They are.
Okay,
So when someone is dysregulated, that is part of why the if then, first then, they're simple, they're clear. There's not a lot of extra information. You're not going, so to your example, Bob, you're not going to say, well, you might get hurt, you might break a leg, right? That's too much information. The whole why behind it, we're not doing the why. We're doing, this is the expectation, this is what will happen. Right? And it's not like, oh, it's if you do this, then you get what you want. If you don't, then you don't. Very clear. Very succinct. The other option that you can do, and this is my personal favorite, is I give a fail-safe choice. I give two choices, both of which I win. Woo! I like to win. So this is like, hey, we can listen to the story sitting in the chair, or we can listen to the story walking in the back. Which one are we doing? We're listening to the story. That's happening. Okay? Now I don't say that to them, right? So we can play on the lower level of the playground, or we can play in the grass. Which one are we doing? Right? They are in control of the choice. They are empowered to make a choice. But they're acceptable choices. Right? I win in whatever scenario. Like, I'm fine if they play in the grass. That's not a problem for me. Right? Two choices, both of which you win. I like this one because it empowers the kid. It makes them feel like they have control, and let's be honest, all of us respond better when we feel like we have a say in what's happening. Kids are not different. Right? If only we could do that a little bit better with God. We could surrender that. That's the trick, right? So yeah, limit setting. Okay. This is one of the things I want to talk about, especially when it comes to behavior. There tends to be this, well, it's not fair if I let this kid do it and I don't let the other kids do it. Okay? It's not fair if I allow this and I don't. It's not a matter of fair. Having a disability is not fair. You want to talk about fair? Having a disability is not fair, right? I love this illustration because right here, this first one, that's fair. Everyone got the box. It was fair. Everyone got the same thing. Is it helpful? No, not really. This other one, also fair, right? The second one is not necessarily fair in the sense that everyone gets the same thing, but it's equitable. Everyone gets what they need, right? The best thing though is if we can just change it where we don't have to have those things. Can we just make it all more accessible? Can we just look at the way we're doing things and make everything that we do accessible? Because as a church, we want to be accessible to all people, right? And sometimes, right, we don't have the ability to go all the way to that last one. There are certain things that are in place or certain things that are structured a certain way that we don't have that ability. But we can definitely do the middle, where we can provide to each person what they need to be able to engage. Fair is not everyone gets the same thing. Fair is everyone gets what they need. So when it comes to addressing where kids are at, fair is getting them what they need so that they can engage in the gospel, so that they can engage in church. That's fair. Okay, physical ones, like I said, this is one of the easiest ones for most people because they're like, well, yeah, if someone's in a wheelchair, we need to have ramps. That's simple, right? We need to have accessible doorways. We need to have seating options that are needed for people, right? These are all things that like it's easier to see, like if eating and feeding, right? If someone has allergies and stuff, we need to either provide something that they can eat if we're going to be providing food for everybody, or we need to communicate with the parent ahead of time and say, hey, this is what we're gonna be eating. If they can't have it, can you supply something else? That's okay. Parents in general are gonna be pretty receptive to that. In fact, generally the response to that from a parent is, thank you for remembering so that I could bring something so they're not just left out, right? Sensory tactile things. So again, this is like some kids need to move, some kids need to fidget. I think of my friend Nick, who simply cannot sit still in a seat. He just can't do it and still be a functional person, okay? So providing people the physical things that they need. This one I don't do as much talking on because it is a lot more straightforward and people don't really tend to have as many mental barriers to it. If someone physically needs something in order to be able to engage, we need to make it accessible. Okay, but one of the things that we don't consider all the time is that like how hard it is for some people to sit, how hard it is for some people to be in a loud worship setting. Okay, some kids might need to put their headphones on or go to the back or go step outside when there's loud worship going on because it's sensory overload, okay? So just being aware of those physical needs, and when a physical need presents itself, do what we can to meet that. Okay, that's it. That's all I got. I know there's a lot of information. I know there's a lot more that we could go into, but I also know we have a time limit. So questions or specific things that have to do with what you guys are facing or dealing with or things like that, please keep in mind, do not use names. There is a possibility that this goes online and we need to protect individuals. Okay, thanks. Barbara had her hand raised.
You were saying,
They want it on the mic.
So you go to the child and you give them a couple of options, and like you said, would you like to stand with me over here? What if they say no?
Well, so that's where you would limit set.
Can you give me an example?
So like, hey, like if they're not doing what they're supposed to do, will you come, hey, why don't you come stand with me over here? No, I don't want to, and they just keep picking at whatever they're doing. Okay, so we can stand over there, or we can come sit over here.
Right, you want to give two choices.
Mm-hmm.
But what if they don't want to do either one of them? They're non-compliant.
I'm just gonna enforce that.
Okay.
And what I have done, hey, we're gonna do this, and if you don't make a choice, I'll make a choice for you.
Okay.
Okay? But please keep in mind, like, acceptable choices, but also choices that they'll enjoy. Like, can they walk around in the back? Yes. Can they sit or lay on the floor? Yes. Right? Those are acceptable choices. So give them a choice that you know they will like, but is also acceptable. Remember, church is supposed to be a place that they enjoy. So we want to try and make it friendly and enjoyable and as well as meeting the needs of everyone else. I was like, I know when I was here, like, that's one of the other things too, like when it comes to precipitating factors, like a kid is really tired. So they are putting their head down and they're sleeping during church. Just let them, okay? It's okay. Maybe they really need a nap. Maybe they really need to just come to church and get rest because they're not getting it at home. And I know that was something like back in the days when the main church was in the sanctuary. Do you remember where one of my college friends laid down in worship in the middle of the aisle, face down on the ground, and then halfway through, all of a sudden we all started hearing him snore, and it was like, well, all right. Sometimes people just need to rest, and we need to just let them. Go ahead.
We talked about sometimes the children disrupting others.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any flags we can pick up on where maybe they're fidgeting and we wouldn't want them to distract themselves from paying attention?
So a lot of times kids that are fidgety, them being fidgety is not distracting them.
Oh, okay.
Most of the time, like I said, like my friend that I told you about with the ball. A lot of times kids that are neurodivergent, the fidgeting actually helps them listen, actually helps them pay attention. So I wouldn't worry if their fidgeting is not disrupting other people. Let them fidget away. Yeah, it's not gonna be a disruption to themselves.
Their eye contact. Are they paying attention to you if they're not making eye contact?
Yes. Please don't make anyone make eye contact with you. I don't think you realize how hard eye contact is, especially for people on the spectrum, the autism spectrum. Eye contact is hard. If you really want to know that they're paying attention to you, 2 strategies that I have used with kids is I've told them that I want them to look at my chin. I'm like, can you look right here when I'm talking to you so I know that you're giving me your attention? Can you look right here? It's not as painful to have to look at my mouth or my chin. Or I just say, can I hold your hands? And I'll talk to them while I'm holding their hands. If I'm holding their hands, I have their attention. That physical contact, I have their attention. Now, some of them aren't gonna wanna do that, which is where I would do the chin thing. I usually do hands first. Can I hold your hands for a minute while I talk to you? They're not gonna look at you. Please don't make them. It is physically painful to them. Please don't do that to a kid.
So on the same token, should we make children repeat back to us or speak to us if we, you're talking to a child, now, did you understand that? That type of thing. Can you tell me what you just heard?
So yes and no. To a point, you can do that. To a point, that might be wise. But here's what I'm gonna say to you. When you're talking to a kid, again, you need to keep your language short. Please don't lecture kids on their behavior, right? Again, kids have a certain attention span and nobody likes to be lectured on how they're doing things wrong. So I'm actually gonna give an example that last week, I was actually with a young lady, she was 3 years old and she was very dysregulated. And her parents were trying to redirect her, were trying to do different things, and she was screaming and crying, and they tried everything in their bucket, and then I generally wasn't intervening because parents were there, but then I kind of just walked over and was like, can I try? And they agreed, good friends of mine. I took her to another space where there wasn't an audience. I sat down on the ground with her. I had her sit down, and I said, I'll wait till you're done. I'm not gonna yell, I'm not gonna be angry. I'll wait till you're done. It took about 5 minutes. She was very, very dysregulated. We waited, and then she was calm enough, and I said, can I have your hands? And I held her hands, and the issue that was happening at the time is that she really wanted to be sitting on, literally climbing on her mother while her mom was trying to do something, and that was not an option, right? So I said, right now, we cannot sit on mommy. You can sit in the chair next to mommy, or you can stand on the ground. Okay. Which one are you going to do? The chair. Okay. Are you ready to go back out? Yes. And when we go back out, where are we going to sit? In the chair. Great. Let's go, right? I'm not having her repeat a whole bunch of things, but making sure, like, and what are we going to do? Sit in the chair. Great. Let's go. I'm not going to lecture her on all of her behavior and tell her, like, when you do this, it makes mommy feel this. When you do, she can't process all of that, right? And even if she was completely calm, kids can't process a lot of that. We can't expect them to have the cognitive functioning and emotional understanding of adults. They're children, right? So that's what I do. I might have them, I'll ask them a clarifying question and have them, I won't say, now tell me what I said, but I'll ask a clarifying question and have them repeat it to make sure they understood. But yeah, repeat back to me. A lot of them don't have the language to necessarily repeat back to you very well. And especially when we're dysregulated, think about when you get really emotionally heightened and angry. How many of us have a hard time articulating our feelings and our thoughts when we're super emotional? Multiply that by 10 with kids. So, hold on, they want the mic. Sorry, I know we're running real short on time.
How do you balance the ones that are outside of the normal range?
That are neurodivergent, yeah.
And then the others who are extremely intelligent, articulate. We're trying to serve all of these children, and it seems like a lot of modern education goes to the lowest level, and we're hurting
So as
the
an
other
educator,
side. And in church we're dealing with all of it.
Mm-hmm. As an educator, I would love to speak to that. So I'm just going to go ahead and share personally. I have a son, my middle son, who is actually a certified genius. Off the charts IQ, incredibly high functioning, remarkably intelligent young man. Has always been in classrooms and in classes with kids that are neurodivergent as well, and he is not. It has never hindered his ability or his learning. Actually, what it has done is created empathy in him and given him a chance to be a leader. So have those kids be your buddies. Have those kids be the ones that have the responsibility to help those other kids. They are able to understand it at a depth that they can teach it. Let them teach it. Empower them. And also, because of our education system and because of the way, this is not new for the kids. I'm telling you right now, the kids, they're not nearly as bothered by it as we adults are. They aren't. For them, it's normal. It's not like the education system when we were younger where we didn't see a lot of neurodivergency because the kids that were neurodivergent were placed in a different classroom, right? They're now integrated. Our kids are used to this. They will thrive and they will take the opportunity to lead and show us how to lead with compassion.
Isn't it a wrong assumption to assume that a child that is neurodivergent, let's say high ADHD, whatever, that they're not intelligent? It's a wrong assumption.
Absolutely.
Right? Because just the example you gave
Absolutely.
the young man in the youth group, he was extremely able to put concept, even theological things together and understanding, yet he might appear to someone as, quote, not being very intelligent because he had so much movement. So I think it's a very wrong assumption with a lot of our kids to assume they're not learning, not getting it, or they're not intelligent. And so now I'm basically preaching a little bit, everybody.
No, you're right.
I can name them: Edison, Einstein. What's the modern day one that's probably the richest man in the world? Anybody know who that is?
Musk.
Elon Musk. Highly on the spectrum, okay? And so it's a wrong assumption, and that's one of the things in our church culture is we have to break that
Yes.
because we're actually somewhat biased.
And actually, a lot of times, just for clarity with ADHD, a lot of times people with ADHD, actually, in order to be diagnosed with ADHD, part of that is actually high intelligence. So part of what happens with ADHD is that your brain moves a lot faster than your body and your words and stuff are able to keep up. And so a lot of times what we see as disorganized and frenetic behavior is because their brain is going so much faster and they're building connections so much faster than the rest of us are that then they say stuff that seems out of left field, but it's really just 5 connections down the road. And we haven't caught up. So yeah. And again, a lot of times kids with autism, also intelligent, especially and nonverbal kids, intelligent, able to understand. There are deficits in specific areas, but they are able to engage. And a lot of times when we allow them to make those connections with their peers, we see a lot more of what they're able to do come through. And it teaches empathy, and it teaches our other kids how to give grace and how to show Christ-like love.
Is redirecting, stemming, or behaviors that are repetitive ever okay?
No.
And if so, how do you do it? And if not, how do you get them to engage with you if that's generally 90% of the day?
So stemming is repetitive motions. So I want you to think of like when babies are really small and when they're upset, what do we do for them? We rock them, we bounce them, right? That repetitive motion actually calms the sensory system. So kids that are stemming are trying to calm their sensory system. A lot of times kids with autism have a highly dysregulated sensory system. They're trying to calm it. Trying to stop that is just going to make their sensory system more dysregulated.
How do you redirect toy play if what they're doing with the toys is just spinning and you want them to effectively engage to maybe learn new things? I'm just wondering if there's ever a healthy way to do that.
I would say that there needs to be an important distinction between times that they're allowed to just play and do what they want to do as play and times that are more therapeutic and teaching. And in those moments, I would do it by modeling. I would say, let me try, and I'd show them, and I'd say, do it the way I did it. But when kids are playing, I think largely let them play. And I think, like, I would love to have a conversation with you more in depth about some of these things too. Because I think some of the things that you're bringing up that we're talking about are not necessarily going to be the things for the whole church to apply in Sunday school. Right. Correct? So I'd love to touch base with you on some of those things.
Hi. So I have a question. I think it's more in regards to like the older children we deal with, the 1st through 5th graders. We have like group discussions and you know, we kind of just like warm up by just talking about our week or answering a few questions. Sometimes there's just a few children in the classroom who they don't want to participate at all. So how can we kind of acknowledge that without putting them on the spot? When, like, do we let them not participate and just move on if we're in a group setting having a conversation and just...
I mean, if it's just sharing how their week has been, I wouldn't force anyone to do that.
What if it's like an activity that we're all participating in?
So as much as possible, I would try and preface that with that person. Like it's okay for someone to just take information in and not be comfortable enough to participate yet. I think one of the things that's great is if you know ahead of time, like what questions, because for some people it's that it takes a long time to process the question and come up with an answer, that when we're just doing it like off the cuff in a discussion, it's really hard to be able to come up with an answer and formulate your thought. So if you can talk to those kids that are struggling with that ahead of time and be like, hey, we're gonna talk about this. Or next week, we're gonna talk about this. Would you be able to come and share a thought on that for me? And give them more time to figure out what they can contribute.
Okay. Okay,
to
yeah.
figure out what they can bring.
But never force them to participate, right? Like
I would
never-
not force
yeah.
participation in discussion stuff, no. I mean, like, you can be like, we're all sitting here, we're all gonna read, but like, for example, reading, right? So, again, I'm an ESS teacher, so even kids that are behaviorally, socially very typical, I also work with kids that like have learning disabilities, where just the act of reading is very difficult. So again, we want church to be a place that they feel safe, that they want to engage, that they're able to engage in scripture. And what engaging looks like is going to be different from person to person, right? I know, like, even just think of like worship here, right? There are people with flags, and that's amazing. There are people that sit in their seats, and that's amazing. How people engage with what God is doing and with the Holy Spirit is going to look different person to person. And so trying to force someone to do it in the way that you are doing it isn't necessarily helpful. But I would try and preface it ahead of time. If it's someone that you just feel like is hesitant, I would talk to them, hey, we're gonna talk about this. Do you think, or even if it's like, do you think you could practice these verses and next week you might be willing to read it for the group? Or we're gonna talk about this issue. Do you think next week you could share some thoughts on that? And give them a heads up of what's coming so that they have time to formulate those thoughts. You might get more engagement.
And that led me into my next question. I was doing some research on this, and it was addressing this in the congregation, like on a Sunday morning, that it can be overwhelming and very anxiety-provoking for neurodivergent adults to be forced into something that makes them anxious. And the recommendation was, for instance, we asked people if they would, get up and greet one another. But it said to put the phrase like this: if you're able to, get up and greet one another, say hi to one another, because some people just stay sitting. They'll never move. And it's not antisocial probably most times, but is that a good question to say if you're able to, or if that was the recommendation on a YouTube I watched?
You definitely can do that, yeah. I think if you're able to is a fine phrase to say. I think it's fine to say, like, we're gonna greet one another right now, and not just say, like, everyone get up and greet one another. Like, hey, we're just gonna spend some time greeting each other. Is a fine way to say it too. I think just with anything, like, we always want to extend the invitation. We always want to make it the engagement available, but we don't want to force someone, again, like you were talking about, like, if someone has really bad anxiety and we're like, you have to go talk to 3 strangers. I don't want to come here anymore, right? And so we don't want that. I think part of that too is having a few people who are good in talking to people, and it's better to have like one person go and try and talk to that person and have a more extended conversation and build a connection than having 10 people come up and greet them. Right? Because having one conversation with one person is a lot less anxiety inducing than having 10 people all try and come up and say hi, and then you feel like you have to remember all these names, right? So I think some of that might just be bringing an awareness to people and some of your greeting team as well, of like, hey, maybe when we see someone new, we don't all try and meet them. We have one person go and meet them and kind of gauge that person, and then that person can be like, hey, if that person is open to it, then they can go and introduce them to others. Is a good way, because then they feel like they've got an ally in it as well. And it's just a lot less anxiety inducing. So. She's got it in front of you.
So would it be safe to conclude that for children, when we as adults come up to them, that we can sometimes be intimidating to them, even if we're trying to be very soft and loving? We're smiling, we're like right in their faces. We assume they know who we are because we've been going to the church forever, but am I right in that it's
Yes.
scary to a lot of these kids?
Yes.
Whether they're neurodivergent or not.
So, Roger, can I pick on you? Sure. Can you come up here, please? Yeah. Just come stand right here. So, imagine an adult comes over and is like, hello, it's so nice to meet you. Right, nope. Nope. Because even a neurotypical kid, like nobody wants like a giant towering over them. That's uncomfortable, right? Nobody feels comfortable in that situation. When you're meeting kids, hi. It is a lot less intimidating. Go to their level. And if they're showing that they're uncomfortable and walking away from you, we don't have to, like, they do not have to have a grown-up conversation with you, right? Like, if I were to come down and Roderick immediately starts turning away and walking away, I don't have to be like, no, I was saying hi to you, come here. I've literally seen people go, I said hello. And I'm like, and they're not interested. Let it be, please. Thank you. So get on their level and yeah, don't force it. A kid is a kid, and a neurotypical kid is gonna have a hard time with someone towering over them. Get on a kid's level. Nobody feels comfortable with a giant towering over them. And I know you might not feel like a giant, but to a little kid you are. So get on their level, and then yeah, if their body language is that they are not interested in meeting you right then, that's okay, right? It's okay if they're looking away and turning their body away and stuff. You can just be like, well, it was nice to meet you, and then stand up and talk to the parent. That is an okay thing to do. We don't have to force the interaction on a kid. In fact, usually if you don't, they'll probably come around. Kids are pretty friendly usually. All right, we good?
So any more questions? Any more questions, anybody? Concerns? Okay.
All right, well, thank you guys so much.